We're living in a digital world, but only 0.3% of professionals know how to program, how to code. How can we keep going with only 0.3% doing the development work to create everything that the other 99.7% of professionals will need to use in their work? Recently, a group of companies has started to challenge this status quo. These companies are building what have become known as no-code solutions or no-code tools that allow non-technical people to create digital products. In this series of videos, we're going to talk to some of the people behind these companies. These are some of the movers and the shakers that are helping to push forward the no-code movement. Hi, everybody. We are receiving here today Michael Skelly from Stacker. He's the founder of the company, and we're going to talk about some of the history of the company and some of what they're doing right now. Michael, thanks for joining us, for taking the time to have this chat with us and to share some of the details about what you guys are doing right now.
Thanks for having me on.
So, I guess we should start right from the beginning. So where does the company, the idea for the company, and the idea for the name of the company, two interesting things for everybody that hasn't been able to get this background, because these stories of how these endeavors start are always interesting stories. What gave you the idea to start a company doing a no-code tool?
So I actually met my co-founder a long time before we ever started doing Stacker, and we were Salesforce consultants working in a finance company in London, and we had these kind of superpowers by being able to go and work really closely with non-technical people in the business. We could kind of translate exactly what they wanted into apps on the Salesforce platform with a little bit of development, because we were both developers. They could get something exactly what they wanted really quickly. And we had a party trick where we'd go into a meeting. Sam would be tapping away on his laptops, and I would interview these kind of heads of the finance organization and ask them exactly what their app should be like. And then at the end, I'd turn to Sam and say, "So Sam, can you do it?" And he'd rotate his laptop and say, "It's already done." So we met doing that. We had a really fantastic time using that platform, as developers, but really giving us as developers superpowers. I then went on and went into the world of tech and was the CTO of a bunch of very operations heavy startups. And it just felt like I'd lost all my superpowers, and all the dev team, no matter how great they were, could never really keep up with the fast changing set of demands that especially came from the operations team. The product team, that was a very slow evolving thing and very considered, but the operations team kept on wanting to change how they worked, because that is how they innovated in their area of the business. But we were just never able to keep up with what they wanted. And it was just really frustrating for them. And I thought back to my days as a Salesforce consultant and thought, well, then we were able to, just by being that kind of very thin translation layer, powered by a little bit of code and by this low code platform, we were able to let these guys really do whatever they wanted really quickly. And wouldn't it be amazing if we could allow that to happen, but without having to have me and Sam there in the middle? What if these people could just create the tools and apps that they needed themselves directly and own them and iterate on them just as they can do so with their own spreadsheets? And so that's where it all started. We knew that there must be a better way to let these people create these apps without having to rely on the engineering teams slowly kind of getting off their code stools and going off and building it.
Interesting. So you get involved with the no-code things during your Salesforce time, and then you came up with the idea to create a tool. And why is Stacker? Why is based on Airtable in the first? Because I think that the first version was just starting with Airtable. Then you put Google Sheet on place as well. So how do you evolve from the idea of creating such a tool to what is Stacker today?
Well, so we actually started kind of a long way further back before we launched the Airtable specific product. And the first thing we built, we really had kind of Salesforce in mind, but thought we want to make something where much, much smaller businesses should be able to create the kind of data-based applications that you can do in the Salesforce platform, but at a much smaller scale and critically without having to have kind of trained Salesforce developers do it. And so we built a thing that back then was called Work Tools. And the idea was it would get you at the point where you were ready to migrate off spreadsheets and to build a kind of a proper system. And you could do that without having to kind of hire a bunch of developers and to build out this huge, huge set of software to power your organization. And what we found was that people were not yet ready to give up their spreadsheets. Like very few small organizations were at the point where they wanted to put all their trust for running their whole business into the hands of a very new product, because they really liked their spreadsheets. They knew how they worked, and they knew that they could do all the things they wanted to, and it didn't matter that they weren't yet ready to, become really, really sensible and automated with their processes. But we did find that a lot of people were interested in making customer-facing applications based on this data. We showed them that you could connect it to HTML pages, you could pull in the data through an API, and so we spent quite a lot of time following that lead and trying to build a drag and drop app builder of the kind that there's quite a lot out there, where you start with a blank page and then you kind of add on a button and you link the button to a text box, and you wire that together to say when this is filled in, and then you press the button, then add a record into here, and so on. And really built a pretty decent app building platform. And we had customers building social networks and marketplaces and all sorts of different things powered by this app building platform. But we then at some point took a step back and had a look at what who was building these things, and largely it was actually still developers. It was product people, it was consultants who did know how to code and wanted to be able to build MVPs of products in a much faster nature. And that for us wasn't what we set out to do. We hadn't yet achieved our goal of letting non-technical people really build things to help them in their day-to-day life and in their working life. This was still people who would already have access to the technology, just doing it faster, iterating more quickly, and probably in a temporary nature. Like they probably weren't going to build the next Airbnb and keep using Stacker all the way through. And we realized that actually what we wanted to do was let people who already have a process and a business running, so not someone starting a completely new startup and wanting to build a product, but people who have a business, who have customers and who have processes and want to produce an app on top of those. They're the people that we wanted to be able to serve. And for us, the best way to do that is, instead of taking away their spreadsheets from them and saying, bring us all your data, put it in our closed ecosystem, and hope that it does all the right thing. I wouldn't do that, and it sounds like something that I don't think our customers would do either. So we thought, if instead of that, we could let them keep their data where it is. So keep all the spreadsheets they've currently got, keep all the integrations they've got, keep all the processes and workflows they've got around those spreadsheets, but take that data and create an app on top of it with the data still in place, still dynamic and being able to be used, but create an application that they can give to their customers so they can access only their own records. So they can create a kind of a customer portal where they can go and see their order history, create something for their team to go and have a better, safer view of the data that they use in their day-to-day life without having to go into the spreadsheet, potentially break things. If we could do that, that would be really, really powerful. And so we looked around for which was the community of people who were kind of most aligned with that, who was using their spreadsheet kind of data in the way that was most amenable to that. And frankly, what was the kind of fastest moving, most innovative early adopter community? And we found the Airtable community was 100% that.
So you you come into this ecosystem of low code, no code tools from the time that you were working as a Salesforce consultant, and evolved the idea to what you have now in order to serve, in essence, the same type of people that you were serving then, but at a smaller scale, for companies at a smaller scale, right? So that they can also get these superpowers, as you said, that the larger companies could get from using platforms such as Salesforce.
And I think the difference is not just that it's for bigger or smaller companies, because small companies use Salesforce and big companies use Stacker. But I think one real big difference, and I think this is one of the kind of demarcation lines between the old previous waves of no code and low code and the new waves, is that Salesforce is a very top-down thing where you have one instance and that is run by your IT team and it's an admin, and any change has to go through them. And typically you'll need a developer to be able to do the complex things. And so the power is still in the hands of the people who were already creating software, running software, building products, and not in the hands of the people who need it, which are the people in the line of business, the day-to-day people who aren't in IT, who aren't able to write code. And I think our focus is mainly on empowering individuals and individual teams to be able to own their own tools, to be able to create the software they need to run their business.
Yeah, very interesting, because this is the main reason that all other companies say in terms of no code, giving technical power to non-technical guys. So that's exactly the point that Stacker come in. So if I have a problem, if I have a process in place and I do not know how to do it, but I don't want to give this all the requirements to the IT guys, because the IT guys are with plenty of things to do and other priorities. Let me do this thing right now using Stacker. That's the main idea behind. Go faster, go with this, because I gave you a great design. If you gave me the data, we can put together an app in minutes. That's the concept behind it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think in order to make that possible, we had to leave behind a lot of the stuff that we had created in our middle phase, let's call it, when we were letting these people build their MVP products. Back then, you had a lot of control. You could build pretty much anything. But and this is the critical bit, even though you weren't writing code, you were still thinking like a programmer to work out how to wire buttons together and how to see how the whole data flow would work. You were still thinking like a designer to be able to make something that looked beautiful. You had to control all the styling of every single element and lay it all out. And you also had to think like a product person. You had to solve product problems from scratch. You had to work out what would make a great login experience, what would make a great reset password experience, what would make a great newsfeed experience in order to create it. So even though we were theoretically empowering people because they no longer had to write code in order to produce these things, actually they still needed a developer skill set, a designer skill set, and a product skill set in order to achieve this kind of thing. And we've, I think, been quite radical in our approach of saying, we don't let you do that. There is no way to produce exactly the app that you had designed or that you had in your head with Stacker. But instead, as a trade-off, we'll let you make that app within 30 seconds. And we promise it'll be good looking, it'll work really well. It might not work exactly how you had in your head, but it'll be good. And critically, you'll be able to iterate on it really, really quickly. And I think for a lot of the use cases we have, it's more important that you get it up and running and that you can own it and keep changing it than just being able to slog away for months and months and months, get it perfectly to spec, and then it be so brittle you can't change it anymore.
I guess what you're describing to me is something that I thought about for quite some time after I got to know the OutSystems low-code platform. I don't know if you know it, but they have the system where when you create your data definition, you can just kind of drag and drop your table from the table list into their application canvas, and will create all the interface items that you need to the basic stuff to read your data, to input a new record, or to edit the record, and all that kind of stuff. And it comes out looking nice. And the idea behind it is that as you said, you don't really need to make it look perfect, so long as it looks nice and it works, because that is what is important. It's actually that it works. And in the end, it just happens that you'll get your form fields one on top of the other, instead of 3 rows across here, 2 there, and that kind of stuff. But it will be perfectly serviceable, and it will allow you to get your job done faster and that kind of thing. So in essence, I guess the point that you're coming from is very much in line with this way of thinking, right? That the most important thing is that you get people to be able to build a solution for their problem, regardless of trying to make it into, let's call it a work of art, right? For getting it as pretty or as custom as possible, but actually giving them quickly something that is already usable.
Yeah, and I think the tech world has, as a saying, done is better than perfect. I think that's like a mantra that lots of agile people follow, and I think it's definitely true that most of the benefit that you want to get from this app, you will be able to get. Let's say like 99% of it, you'll be able to get by having something that works. And I think one of the things that we really lean on is that in most cases, for the kind of apps we're talking about, so internal apps, customer-facing portals, so not your primary app, not the Airbnb, but something that goes along with a service, something which helps your existing customers interact with you better, rather than being the only thing that you're providing. Most of these things, actually, the benefit comes from exactly how you set up your data, and what are the parts that make up the application. They're not that different between each other in how they display it. They've got lists, they've got forms, they've got detail pages for an individual record. You can log in, you can keep your account details up to date, and that's generally it. And it doesn't really matter whether you're logging in and seeing your order status for your new Tesla, or whether you're logging into your energy company and checking your balance on your gas meter. Both of these things, really, you're just doing exactly the same thing, and they usually, outside of the theming, really presented in quite a similar way. And I think our approach here is that people sign up to Stacker, connect in their data, and they have a working app from the first moment, which then they can go and configure to be a better app, for an app that's more appropriate for their use case. They can theme it. They can choose to make things, if it's a profile, make it look like a profile page. We can do that with one click. And I think what we often tell people is that we are not an app builder. We're just an app that you can customize with your data to fit really well for your use case. And I think that is the major approach that we've taken to everything that we've done to really keep it as low bar as possible while still having a really high ceiling.
And what about the competition? Do you think that there are other players coming to the same arena trying to do exactly the same thing, or very close to what you are doing right now? Because I can see other products that are trying to generate apps directly from Google Sheets and Airtable and all sorts of things. But talking with you right now, it's quite clear for me that you have a very interesting perspective of creating solutions for process people, for business people that really have a problem to be solved right now. So put something in place, solve your problem, and move ahead. Stop doing these things that you have to deal with spreadsheets and losing control and do not giving to your customers or even to your internal people good thing to deal with. So you gave them a solution. Make it better. You can make it right fast right now. So how is the arena that you are, how are you looking to this arena right now? And is there other players coming into? Do you think that people is understanding right now that no code can be something that is useful, not just for app building in a traditional way? You can do it in different apps, but in a very interesting way.
Yeah, so I think you're entirely right about that kind of like different area of the whole no code space. And I think there is a really, really, I think maybe a bit too much of a focus within the no code community, especially within the discourse around like how good of a product can we build? Like how close is this to building the next Airbnb? And you know, frankly, most people out there who are not developers are not looking to build the next Airbnb, but they do have fantastic ideas, either standalone ideas or ideas within the kind of context of their business that could be done on no code, but not really building an app here. When I look at the other players, I think one company we really admire is Glide. I think Glide have taken a very similar approach to us in that rather than kind of dragging and dropping lots of individual parts and being very free, they also take data that you've already got in a spreadsheet or from a template and turn that into, in their case, a really great looking mobile app. And I think we are very, very similar in that way. And the main difference I'd say there is that you know, as a mobile app and as a Glide has solved one of the biggest problems with spreadsheets, which is that they're really, really hard to use on mobile. And I think they're a fantastic way if you've got data that you want to present. So like, I don't know, if you're at a conference, you want to have an app of the conference attendees, spreadsheet is terrible, but a Glide app is fantastic. Our approach is more specifically around taking things that people use to get their work done, or they use to present to their customers for them to interface with them as a business, and to turn those into working apps. And so, you know, we're great and we're mobile responsive, but also a lot of our use case is desktop because that's where people do most of their actual work. Even in this kind of mobile heavy world, most of business is still done on desktop and on web apps. And I think that kind of shows in the level of complexity of the apps that people are making. You know, this isn't just a kind of 1 screen, 2 screen app. These go, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 deep. And the great thing about Stacker is building a 10 screen deep app is no harder than building a 2 screen deep app because you've got that data already. And we let you present that on the screen, and you just need to choose what is the best way to show that.
So from looking at it from your perspective, how do you see the different kinds of no-code tools that are showing up today? And as you said, you're occupying a portion of the no-code space, which is quite different from a lot of other tools. But considering the no-code ecosystem as a whole, how do you see it going forward in terms of market adoption, market penetration? Like how much of the companies that or how many of the companies, I guess, in terms of percentage you believe, that will be fully into using no-code tools over like the next 2 or 3 years? Because it seems to be getting a lot of attention right now, especially because of the whole pandemic thing, right? Because the demand for digital solutions has skyrocketed, and just aren't enough developers to go around. There weren't enough before the pandemic. Right now, the thing's just crazy.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I think one of the things about no code is it's a bit like the term horseless carriage. And it was like very relevant to call a car that back when everyone was riding cars. But very, very soon, like if you said to someone, you know, oh, is your carriage horseless? Why would it be? Why would it have a horse? And I think the no code adoption curve, like as things become more and more mainstream, more and more applicable for not just the kind of really key core innovators and really enthusiastic early adopters, but they start to move into the mainstream. They start feeling less and less like no code or low code, because they really just start feeling like apps or like software. And you know, just like people no longer would think of, I think WordPress as a no-code blog builder. It's just like, oh, WordPress does blogs. That's it. Like, you don't write code, but that's kind of like irrelevant. And just like if you make an event on Facebook, it's not a no-code event page builder. it's just a platform that does events. And I think as these tools move further down, they are less identifiable as no code. And also, I think one trend I've definitely started seeing is that as platforms move that way, they start to not refer to themselves in that way. And I think if you look at tools that have really great widespread adoption, like Airtable and Zapier, very rarely do they actually use the kind of no code moniker about themselves. They're just an automation platform and a spreadsheet or database platform, and less really thinking about like, is this no code or not? It's just part of your tech stack.
Interesting. Tell us a little bit about the name. Why is the name Stacker? What is the idea behind this name, and why did you get? How long did you take to get to this name? Because as you said, you started with another idea, with another name, then you come up with Stacker, and then you are still Stacker. Tell us a little bit about this journey.
Yes. So we started with what was back then just a real holding name. You just got to choose something. And then get on with it. You can't spend your lifetime fretting over it. So we were called Work Tools, and that was a bad name because it sounded descriptive and it was not really very descriptive of even what we were doing. I think we really liked the name Stacker. We played with a lot of other things, but we really liked the name Stacker because it both evokes a stack, like a tech stack, and also the idea of kind of putting things on top of each other. There's a kind of quite do-it-yourself kind of motion there, and a little bit, if you think about it, like Lego blocks, you're stacking those on top of each other. That's that kind of feeling of creating something yourself. So yeah, that was the genesis of it, and I think the only regret I have is that a lot of people get a little bit of overlap with Slack in our heads, and sometimes we get called Slacker.
It's interesting that for the older people in the room, and these would be us, right? It kind of evokes. There was this compression tool from I don't know 1980s, 90s. I don't even remember how long ago that was. But there was this compression tool that was called Stacker back then. And it was actually the first thing that I thought about when I heard about Stacker. Is that's interesting. I wonder if it has anything to do with it. It was pretty popular back then because it just was this fantastic idea that you kind of just compress your whole disk, and now it's part of the operating system. Nobody thinks about it anyway. But it's an interesting thing to see how far we've come along. And I think that goes exactly into what you were just referring when you said that, as tools kind of mature, they stop referring to themselves as a no-code tool, that kind of thing, because they just become something that does that thing. And it's quite obvious. And it actually, we were just discussing this last night, the two of us, that people just generally don't think about some of these things as no-code tools, and then therefore, when they're looking at stuff to do without coding, sometimes they kind of become a bit blind to those things. As you just mentioned, WordPress. Just yesterday we were discussing this because we saw this tweet from somebody that said, personal record, created the MVP of the document that everybody was been asking in 25 minutes using Notion. There was a lot of things. There was Notion, there was Super to get the domain working for Notion so that you could have it as a named website. And it only took him 25 minutes to do the MVP of a document. I was saying, since when do you need an MVP for a document? And the other thing is, if you just want a text with bullet points, you could do that. Of course, you could do that with Microsoft Word, but you could do it with WordPress in 5 minutes and have it up and running, and everybody would be able to access it and there you go. You don't really need to kind of connect different tools in order to do that. You just go into WordPress.com, get a free website, and type in the text, right?
Yeah. And you know, WordPress is the most like successful no-code tool, I think. It's the only place where, as a non-technical person, at least for many years, you could just sign up, add a couple of modules. You want to have a comment feed, you can do that. You want to have a store, you can do that. You want to have a social network, there's a, you know, I'm sure there's a plugin for that. It was phenomenally successful just by being really modular and having obviously a vibrant ecosystem of people contributing to it and making all that possible.
Considering all the other tools that you are watching appear into the marketing, the ones that are older, and you mentioned already Glide, what are the other ones do you think that are moving into a right direction, even if it's not competing directly with Stacker and with the things that you guys are doing right now?
Yeah, so I definitely think the ones that are kind of carving out their own category niches and really being separating out, I think teasing out the core thing that people think of, which is like, oh, I'm creating software. Actually, once you start to pull that apart, there are lots of very, very fertile grounds in which you can make huge amounts of progress without having to be a drag and drop builder. And like I would actually put things like Notion and Coda really squarely into that space. That a lot of the stuff that people do there, some of it's a bit like a wiki, but a lot of the stuff is quite like a business app or quite like even customer-facing apps. But they've chosen to cut off a certain set of functionality that you might want to do. And you know, those guys are really, really kind of quite limited on how it can look. It looks like a document, but for loads of things, that's great. And I think in general, where I admire people is where they've taken that central idea and unbundled some part of it into one of these more kind of tailored use cases, and in doing so made a product which is much better. And I think really the no-code revolution has really been made possible by this unbundling, and versus the kind of the previous generation of we'll do it all kind of tools, by having Airtable split out the database functionality, and in doing so be able to create a fantastic database functionality. In Zapier, being able to unbundle everything apart from the automation, and even not having its own app, just really having automations between other apps. They've been able to make that so slick and so usable. And we've ended up in what I think is a much better world, where we've got kind of a stack approach. You've got your SaaS stack, your no-code stack, built of the best of breed tools, rather than having this kind of single platform where you have to believe that they're going to be able to do it all for you. And if you're wrong, then sorry, try the next platform. This way is much better because it means that creators can focus on building something which really, really solves one use case very tightly. And it means people can choose the best of breed tools and also the tools that fit them best without having to compromise.
It's interesting that you mentioned Notion and Coda. Those were some of the very first products about which we created videos when we started talking. Just to put it in context, so we started a YouTube channel in Brazil talking about how the exponential evolution of technology was impacting our lives and our businesses. And we just did normal conversations about this. And people that were watching, they started asking us how they could put the stuff that we were talking about into practice in their lives, in their business. And like Notion and Coda were two of the tools that we actually created videos about using and taking some of the stuff that we were talking about and bringing them into your lives about a year and a half ago or something along those lines. We actually run our company all on top of Notion, for example. We keep all our information, all our research information, or business information in a Notion workspace. And as you said, it does empower you to create stuff that actually is quite close to business applications. And actually, for a lot of people, they really don't need any more than what you get from there. And in a sense, Notion comes across to me as what, I don't know if you used it in the past, but what Microsoft SharePoint could have been if they weren't so worried about making it tie into everything else that Microsoft did, and just try to give you a tool for you to solve your everyday business problems, like, which I guess it's my perspective on what Notion is doing. So just for us to kind of wrap this up, how do you see these sorts of tools coming together in the future? Because I think that is one thing that you've mentioned that I think makes a lot of sense. Like, you can get the best of breed for different things that you need, and you can combine them, and that is clearly something that you can do quite well now. But then I believe that in the not so far future, some of these tools that we're talking about, such as Notion and NOCODE, they also become data sources that will be interesting to be combined in other ways. You see that is something that we'll be seeing anytime soon?
I really think so, and I think at least one of them has kind of a fairly new API that's doing pretty well, and I think maybe the other one is getting close there. I think one of the striking things that has happened recently over the past kind of like 5 or 8 years is a real proliferation of the kind of places that people store data, and also like what sort of data is stored there. Like, what used to all be in spreadsheets is now split between things like Airtable, but also things like Notion and things like Trello. There's also a data store for a very certain type of data and data that's used in a particular way. And I think we're banking on that. Our long-term plan is to really help you take data from across your stack, from anywhere in your business, and bring it in and create applications powered by that data, while still being able to manage it and service it in the original app, and use that for what it's meant to be used for, and use it in a different location powered by Stacker for a different context. And I think it's really gonna feel quite bad when you are using some application that is just a silo, that is not connected, that is hard to integrate with, and where ultimately it's a black hole that you put the data in and it doesn't come out anywhere. And I can't see apps like that really sticking around for very long.
Michael, it's been a great conversation, and we would like to thank you again for taking the time to join us and to share with us and everybody that's watching some of the history of the company and some of the stories that actually tell us about how you got there. So thank you again for joining us.
Thanks, it's been fun.